Welcome to the Emergent Literacy Theory presentation. Please note that there are audio recordings on each slide, so make sure you are hearing my voice on each slide. And secondly, there are corresponding activities, some written responses, and some videos to watch that have already been uploaded on Blackboard, so make sure you have access to that as you're watching the presentation. All right, enjoy. We're going to be talking about emergent literacy theory in this presentation. So to start us off, let's read a great definition from two researchers in the field named Whitehurst and Lonigan. They define it as, emergent literacy consists of the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that are presumed to be developmental precursors to conventional forms of reading and writing, and the environment that supports these developments. So we're looking at the time when a child is born until they can read and write, so approximately third grade. There are three core beliefs to emergent literacy. The first one is that the home environment impacts a child's literacy development. And we'll talk more about that later in this presentation, but note that tenet of emergent literacy really overlaps with family literacy theory. Both of them believe that parents play an important role in a child's literacy growth. The second belief of emergent literacy is that literacy development begins at birth and is ongoing. So emergent literacy theorists believe that even when you start talking to a child and when you start reading to them when they are babies, that is part of their literacy development. That's very different from the maturation and stage model theories that don't believe in teaching literacy until children are much older. The third belief of emergent literacy is that listening, reading, writing, and speaking are all connected. And so this really means that children are slowly layering their knowledge and awareness of those four components: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And that if they develop skills in one of those areas, it will help boost their skills in another area. So the better they are at speaking, it will help them with writing. This also connects a little bit to whole language theory. Both whole language and emergent literacy believe that those four components are interrelated. I want to go over some understandings that children should be acquiring during the emergent phase. Number one, phonemic awareness. This includes syllables, rhymes, and phonemes. You can play a lot of word games with kids, singing songs, reading poetry. They're great ways to help develop that. Secondly, familiarity with the alphabet. Singing the song, recognizing the different shapes, curved lines, or straight lines that letters have, sorting the alphabet, or putting it in order like my students are doing in that picture. Concepts of print we're going to go into on the next slide, so I'm not going to talk much about that here. Emergent writing. You should start seeing students or children progressing through phases of emergent writing. It may start out with just scribbles or drawings, moving on to random strings of letters. So that definitely shows that students see that there's a difference between a picture and text. And then from there, moving on to more phonetic spellings that shows they're hearing a sound in their head and knowing it relates to a letter on the page that makes a sound. Noticing print, and I have a picture of a little boy pointing here because this is really talking about, are kids starting to ask questions about print? Are they noticing it around when they're out at a store? Do they see Legos and know that that particular picture of words or picture and words mean Legos? So this is really talking about Are they becoming more motivated to read and write and noticing it in their world, noticing that it's part of their world and distinguishing it from other parts of their world? And print intentionality, and by this we mean, are they recognizing that words carry meaning? So that gives you kind of a backdrop as we move forward into, on the next few slides, how to implement this theory into our teaching. One way to put emergent literacy theory into practice is to help children develop strong concepts of print. So, what are concepts of print? Basically, these are the things that a child understands about a book and knows about a book before they can actually read. So, that's really the gateway knowledge that they need to have to help them eventually become a reader. So concepts of print include things like book orientation, where's the front, where's the back, page sequencing, where do I go after I read this page, one-to-one correspondence, do they understand that when I am talking, it corresponds to each word on the page, and can they follow that? The return sweep, do they understand that when I'm done reading one line, I go to the next line? And distinguishing text features, are they able to distinguish a picture from words? Are they able to distinguish punctuation marks? Do they know the difference between a letter and a word? Those sorts of things. So why is it so important to teach concepts of print to children? It seems rather basic, doesn't it? So imagine a 3-year-old child at home that doesn't have any books in their life, or they're only read to occasionally. Without that hands-on experience to hold a book and explore it, this child will have developed very little schema for the form and function of a book, which is really what concepts of print is trying to develop. This child won't know that no matter which book she picks up, the book has a consistent function to carry meaning or a story and a consistent form, that it always reads from left to right and always has the same direction moving with the pages. So children really need to have many purposeful and frequent interactions with text and have features of text pointed out to them repeatedly in books or environmental print around the community to help them develop a solid foundation of how print works. This goes right along with schema theory. And I'd like to read from our Lenses on Reading book a little bit to give you a refresher on schema theory. So on page 62 it says, schema theory suggests that the more elaborated an individual schema for any topic, the more easily he or she will be able to learn new information in that topic area. The theory also suggests that without existing schemata, it's very hard to learn new information on a topic. So if a child doesn't have schema that's already built in for concepts of print in those early years of their life, I would argue that it really slows that process of literacy development. It's really that initial gateway that sets up emerging readers for the next step in their literacy development. A child needs to have a lot of exploration with print so they can build on that schema and help them move on to that next step of learning how to read the words. So now it's your turn for an activity. You are going to watch a video of Yuli, my nephew. He's almost 4 years old, and he's exploring a book. You're going to assess his current understanding of concepts of print. So to do that, you're going to use a concepts of print assessment that I have uploaded to blog, as well as the video of Yuli. So please read the first page that talks about the purpose and the directions for concepts of print assessment. And then familiarize yourself with page 2 of that document, which is the assessment itself. And you can be ready to take notes on that assessment, or if you don't have it printed out, it's fine. Just take it on some notes in front of you. And on Blackboard, you'll post a written reflection on your observations of where you think Yuli is at in his current understanding of concepts of print. What does he understand? What is he attending to? And what are some next steps to help him? So there is one point in the video where his older brother speaks up and tells him something. So please keep in mind that when you hear a little boy's voice talking about how he's turning too many pages, that's his older brother talking, and it's not actually Yuli the child himself. So sorry if that's a little bit confusing on the video. All right, so go ahead and go to Blackboard and watch that now. So dialogic reading is one classroom practice that teachers can use to help emergent readers in their classroom. So it was developed by Grover J. Whitehurst, and he was really interested in finding out how to increase language development and vocabulary acquisition in young children around the preschool years. So something that really sets this apart from traditional reading is that traditional reading, you have generally the adult reading and the child is listening. In dialogic reading, the roles have switched. The child's role is to tell the story. The adult's role is to actively listen to that child and give them feedback, to ask questions, to add information about what the child is saying, or to fill in any gaps that the child hasn't said, and really just helping that child increase the sophistication of their answers, what they're describing on the page, helping that child to use more details and description. So we'll get into that on the next slide, but that's generally the adult's role. So really, the focus is on vocabulary development more than on using it as a reading comprehension strategy. That's not what it is. Its focus is on helping children develop vocabulary skills. So it's really important to use this one-on-one or within small groups for that reason. If you are doing this with a group of 30 kids, how many of them are you going to get to be able to speak during one dialogic reading? Probably not very many. And since the focus is on helping them practice their expressive vocabulary, it would make sense that you would do this one-on-one or with 3 or 4 children, where that would give a few amount of children many opportunities to practice talking about what they're seeing on the illustrations on the page. It's to be used with books that have beautiful illustrations. They've recommended, in the research I've done, to not use more abstract art in this approach, because you want it to be pictures that the child at that age can really identify and talk about, and pictures that really help tell the story so that they can use those pictures as an aid in helping them develop their vocabulary. So I'm guessing you could use wordless picture books in this. I haven't read anything about that, but I think that that would be a great way for 2- and 3-year-olds especially to use this approach. And using something with limited text is what they've recommended as well in the research. Dialogic reading can be used flexibly, and by that I mean it's not supposed to be used with every single read aloud that you do. Traditional reading is still great. This is just one approach to use if you're trying to target vocabulary for an emergent reader. There has been research that has shown that when comparing dialogic reading in particular to just shared reading in general, which could be defined as a teacher reading aloud a book and occasionally asking a question, That comparison has been researched, and it shows that dialogic reading has helped children across the board in all socioeconomic levels develop their vocabulary quicker. So that's some cool research to see how useful this strategy is. So on the next slide, we're going to talk more specifically about what questions are asked during dialogic reading. There's a very systematic way of doing it, but in general, it's the first level is asking a child completion questions or very simple WH questions, who, what, that sort of question. The second level gets a bit more complex, which it would be open-ended question about what the child is seeing on the page. And the third level should only be used sparingly and only when the child is ready for it, and only after 1 and 2, first and second levels, are really solid with that child. Level 3 is expansion and connection questions, so connecting what they've read in the text to their own life, or looking at reading between the lines type of questions. And we'll go into more of that next. So this slide shows 3 really great bookmarks from an article by Kylie Flynn. And these bookmarks really show the details of how to implement the level 1, 2, and 3 questioning of dialogic reading. The important things to remember as you put into practice dialogic reading with a child is to focus on 3 things. 1, keeping it fun. 2, praising the child for what they know. And 3, repetition. You should be reading one book many times and using these practices rather than reading many, many different books and doing the levels only once. So those are 3 things important to this practice. The other thing is to use what you've heard the child say and to inform the feedback that you give that child. So if you're doing a level 1 questioning and you're pointing to a dog and the child says dog, you can follow up your answer or follow up that with a more detailed response by saying, correct, a running dog. And so using just 1 or 2 extra words to help improve their vocabulary. We don't want to be giving them a whole paragraph about the dog. That's going to overwhelm them. So just slow, small steps is really important. So go ahead and read through the 3 bookmarks to make sure you're familiar with how to do the questioning. And then please go to Blackboard, where there will be 2 videos on dialogic reading waiting for you. Please watch those, and then there will be a small activity to do a write-up on dialogic reading. The emergent literacy theory emphasizes the importance for children to have a literature-rich home environment, but we know that many children don't have that opportunity. So Susan B. Newman, who is a professor that specializes in early literacy development and has done a ton of research out in the world, she was curious about answering the question, well, what about those kids that don't have access to a literature-rich home environment? How do we help them have access so that they can develop their early literacy skills? So she takes the idea of opportunity to learn, or OTL, which means that a child's ability to learn is determined by their access to it. And she sets out a plan to find out how much access do children have to text in low SES neighborhoods in particular. So she finds out in the Capitol Hill neighborhood in Washington, D.C., that there were only 2 books per child, and for preschoolers, there weren't any age-appropriate texts for them. So she wants to do something about this lack of books. She partners with JetBlue Airlines and Random House Publishing to fill 3 vending machines with children's books within this neighborhood. And they're placed strategically in highly frequented areas like a church or a store, grocery store. And excitingly, in an 8-week period, 27,000 books have cycled through these vending machines. There's a common belief that low-income parents don't value education for their children, and Newman's vending machine study does a remarkable job refuting that assumption. Her vending machine adventure was in the news, so take a moment now and watch that news clip on Blackboard. The second argument Newman makes is that if we want parents to interact with their children in early literacy activities, those parents need to be provided with the resources to do this, especially if they are low income and don't have the money to provide those resources. So this goes hand in hand with the belief in emergent literacy theory that parents play a big role in developing their children's development, and this also overlaps a little bit with family literacy theory. So in this study, Newman wanted to help make reading an enjoyable, positive experience for parents and children. So she set up a program at Head Start for parents and their children to interact in a book club for 1 hour a week for 12 weeks. The focus was on teaching parents strategies for how to talk about books, and she also really wanted to help convey the message to parents how important it was for them to promote to their children their own values and beliefs through this literacy interaction with their child. The parents also received free books at the end of each weekly session. The facilitators chose books that were engaging, but that wouldn't be too intimidating for parents that may themselves have reading difficulties. So during the sessions, the facilitator taught choral readings, they emphasized repetitive phrases in books, they used drama to show actions that were happening in the book. And then the parents were asked at the end of the book, what would you want your child to take away from this book? What kinds of questions would you use to stimulate discussion of the story? And how would you help your child revisit this book? So the parents attended sessions regularly, and they even continued the book club after the 12-week study had concluded. So by creating a greater opportunity and access to resources for children and parents to learn, the children's concepts of print and their receptive language had improved. So this study really drives the point home of how important it is to have parental involvement in children's early literacy development. Her third argument is that we need to provide ambitious teaching. She calls it ambitious teaching if we want our children to learn big ideas and big concepts. She references an article by Hard and Risley called The 30 Million Word Catastrophe. And I'll just go over Hard and Risley's study really quickly. Basically, they were finding that there were preschoolers that were learning vocabulary words with them in the class, but some of them lost their vocabulary growth when they entered kindergarten. And so they did a study of a range of socioeconomic levels in families and observed their children for 1 hour for a month, 1 hour per month for 2.5 years. And basically they found that a child's accumulation of vocabulary really correlated to their parents' income level. They found that in 4 years, an average child of a professional family would accumulate almost 45 million words compared to a welfare child, or in a welfare family, would only accumulate 13 million words within 4 years of their life. So Newman really uses this study and decides to create a vocabulary program focused on engaging science education topics like rainforests or animals, and creates this program called World of Wow. And you can look it up online, this program, where students in these low income schools that were high poverty were learning these amazing topics and vocabulary in an engaging way and talking about big science concepts. And it really helped children foster a love of learning, she found, because they were exposed to such engaging topics and big ideas. I would highly recommend reading this article. It was such an encouraging thing to read about someone that studied such important concepts here. And I think that, to conclude, I think parents in this article really care. Newman showed that parents really care about their children's education and how important it is to find ways to give all children an opportunity to learn, especially when we know there are such inequalities in young children's literacy environments. Thank you for watching my presentation.